Today is Tuesday, March 28th. I'm Joan Gremont and Anitra Cousin is using the camera, and we're interviewing Lou Navius. Lou, it's nice to see you in your lovely home. And let's start by talking about your life in South Africa. Well, before we get to your life in South Africa, your family that came to South Africa, where they came from, when they came, what they did, whatever you can tell us about your family.
Well, my late mother's father came from Lithuania via England, and she was actually born in Durban, South Africa, and so she was a native South African. My late father's, and I don't know where about Lithuania he came from, but they were Litvaks. My late father's family came from Lithuania as well, and because the name was Navius or Naviaski, and I found that there were Navises here in America, they came at the turn of the century. In fact, my late father told me how all the streets in Johannesburg were dirt roads when he came there. And the two eldest brothers, his two eldest brothers, he was a family of 10. The two eldest brothers were named Louis and Coleman. And I'm named after Louis and Coleman, the two eldest brothers. And I traced back, and he told me they came from a village near Pornovis, which was a major town, and I found near the town of Pornovis there was a little river called the River Navius, and so I established that about 30-40 kilometers away, I established that that's where they came from. And apparently Arlene's family came from a very, very close by shtetl over there as well. When my late mother's father, he started a little grocery business, whereas my father's family, the father was a butcher, but he died very young, and my father's mother ran a boarding house. And a lot of the books you see in here, my late father used to swap his canadles from his mother's soup in the boarding house and get cigarette cards. And with the cigarette cards, he'd collect them up and get books sent to him. Those books, in fact, are going to be selected out. I'm going to give it to Craig, my son, so that he'll have that legacy of my late father's books. College was very, very expensive at that time, or school, high school. None of the kids went to high school. My late father was the number 1 or number 2 student in the whole of the Transvaal. And he managed to get a scholarship to, I think it was Jeppe or Parktown High, I'm not sure which one was the older one. And just as a point of interest, how wonderful the high schools were. The high schools had as teachers all dons from Oxford or Cambridge teaching them. So that's a very interesting fact, because nobody knows what the quality of schooling was over there, but that's why the high schools were so expensive, but they imported teachers from England.
So your family lived all in Johannesburg, is what you're saying? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So tell us about your own life growing up in South Africa, your family, your schooling. You've told us a bit about.
Well, we grew up at a very lower level of, we weren't short of food, but there was little else in our household. When I grew up, for instance, when I went to high school, I couldn't afford long pants. In the middle of winter, I went to high school with short pants on for a couple of years in the middle of winter, and I didn't even have a long sleeve sweater. When I went to school, I walked to primary school and to high school. I managed to get a bus, because at that stage you could get coupons for 2 pennies a coupon, but or I used my bicycle. I used to be an avid reader, so I used to walk 3-4 times a week to the library from my home, which was about 1.5 miles as a kid in primary school, to get books. And I used to read 6-7 books a week.
And where did you live in Johannesburg? Whereabouts?
I lived in Yeovil.
And
Yeovil was the very lower middle class area, but in school, for instance, my primary school, we had a token non-Jew, and in my high school, until they took away as a co-ed, we had a couple of token non-Jews.
so the primary school was Yeovil Boys?
And high school was Athlone.
Okay. All right, interesting. So where and when did you and Arlene meet?
I met Arlene as my best friend at the time was a lawyer, and she was working there, and I was came back from a trip to Israel, and I was trying to find my way, and I took a job as a country salesman selling shoes, and I used to go and visit my friend in his office, and Arlene was his secretary, and that's how we met.
Okay. And just before we get on to your children, your siblings, do you have brothers and sisters?
I had an elder brother who's since passed. He went to Israel as a Machal in 1948 to fight in the War of Independence, and lived in Israel, and then he passed on, I think it's already 5 years now. And my sister is still living. She's in East London, but she's living as a vegetable. She's doesn't understand who she is or where she is. She's now got to the point where she at least smiles instead of being stern. You go through those stages, as did my brother as well.
All right, so you met Arlene, you got married, and where did you start your family?
We started our family in a very, very small building called Cardiff Arms in Hillbrow, in a 1-bedroom apartment. And when we came back from honeymoon, which we had the best suite on the ship, and my mother-in-law, my mother wanted to boil some water, I told them to use a saucepan. And they said, haven't you got a kettle? I said, no. They said, well, we'll go and buy you one. I said, how much it cost? They said 3 and 6. And I said, I've only got 25 cents to my name. And that's how we started off, Arlene and I.
And your children, were they all born in South Africa?
All born in South Africa.
Okay. So how and why did you make the decision to leave South Africa?
Well, I'll go back a few years. When I was in college, Chief Buthelezi came to talk to us. And I was sitting in college, not with 3 whites. I was sitting in college with 1 white friend, 1 black friend, and 1 Indian friend. And Chief Buthelezi made the following statement. He said, I love you all you people over here, especially you white people. He said, but comes a revolution, we're going to kill you all. That's what the moderate Chief Buthelezi of the Zulus said to us that day, and I was 19 years old. So when we got married, I was all of 24, and Arlene was all of 20 or so. I wanted to leave straight away, especially at Sharpeville in 1960. And Arlene said she's never leaving her family. And I used to travel a lot. I got involved in a business, a very exotic business, and I helped develop it and build it. I started as the storeman and finished as the president. And I worked for Anglovar, which is, as you know, is a huge conglomerate. They employed about 500,000 people. In our division, they employed about 100,000. But at any rate, we traveled a lot, and we bought a beautiful piece of ground in Israel overlooking the Bay of Atlit, which is right next to Haifa today. It's one of the most prestigious parts of Israel, if not the most expensive part, besides certain streets in Jerusalem. And everything was fine. We had a wonderful life, and then I was given the golden handshake at that company, for reasons we don't have to go into, and because I was a little wild young man, and I started my own business, and I had a very, very, very successful business.
And this was in Johannesburg?
This is in Joburg. And we travelled everywhere. And Arlene said she's not leaving her family. However, one day, our eldest daughter was walking home, and a black man started to follow her very aggressively, and she had to run into our neighbour's house, who lived on the same street as us, by the name of Trocky. And Arlene said to me then, she said, that was now 1976, and she said to me, well, I think maybe the timing is right. And we came to America on a visit, bicentennial year. And we came here and we travelled around America, and Arlene said to me, you know what, doll, this is a country I could live in. I said, are you sure? She said, yes. And that started the ball rolling, and that's the main crux why we left, was the danger to our children. From my point of view, the reason why I wanted to leave, there was a twofold one. There was no way that I hated the system, I hated it with a passion, but there was no way that I was going to fight for a system that I knew, according to Buthelezi, that was afterwards going to kill me. The other reason was I saw no future. We had 4 children, and I saw no future for my children there. And I said, I brought these children into the world, they're my responsibility, and I have to give them the opportunity to decide how to live for themselves. If I stay here, they will not be able to make any good decisions because there's no opportunity. But if I put them in an environment where they can go forward on their own volition, that's what I wanted. So those were our twofold things. Arlene from a point of view looking after her chicks, which I understood, and mine from a more broader aspect over there.
So what was your family's reaction to this decision of yours?
Oh, terrible. You must understand, I was supporting my parents. I was helping to support my in-laws, and my parents and in-laws, well, my father had passed on, but my mother and my in-laws used to come to us every Sunday without fail, and most Friday nights, and my mother-in-law turned round to my mother and said, Minnie, it'll never ever be the same. And they were devastated. Our immediate family were devastated.
Okay, but it obviously didn't deter you. And
No.
how come you chose Dallas as your new home?
How come?
Well, how come you came to Dallas?
Very simple. We'd spent time, we actually came to the States, and I had formed a partnership with somebody in Houston. We went to Houston. We hated Houston because we went to Meyer Land, and I don't know if you've ever been to Meyer Land in Houston, which is the Jewish area. And we went to Meyer Land, and it was terrible from the freeways, the smog and that. And I can't stand high humidity, and the humidity was killing me, and the smog over there. And we then travelled all over the States. We had, as I said, I had a very successful business, and we had the latitude to travel all over. My eldest daughter said she'd heard of a town called Dallas, which I'd never heard of, and so we decided to visit Dallas. And we came to Dallas in an ice storm, and we drove up some of them are still here, most have left, and they said, one of them was especially, was an insurance agent, said, don't come to Dallas, it's a terrible place. But we drove up meandering way and went into North Dallas, and we met a lot of kids, and my eldest daughter had also said she wanted to be in a big city with a small city feel. And when we arrived here, North Dallas was exactly that. We were just south of Campbell Road, and Campbell Road was a single lane road. Hillcrest was a single lane road. When you were north of Spring Valley, you never locked your house, you never locked your car. It was an amazing time in Dallas. And we just loved Dallas, as flat as it was, and coming in an ice storm and everything. And so I used to commute. I had a business set up in Houston, and I used to commute there. And we'd visited all over the States, but we decided we wanted to be in a warmer place. Didn't realize how warm Dallas was, but California was too wild for us. Again, we didn't realize the drug issues that there were in junior high in Dallas at the time. We only found out from our children 10 or 20 years later.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, Lou, what year was this that you came?
1978. April 1978.
Okay. So that was like the early wave of South Africans.
Mm-hmm.
So in what way were other South Africans helpful to you, and the general, the community in Dallas? I mean,
Other South Africans, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why? We chose that. We decided when we came here, we wanted to integrate.
Mm-hmm.
We were very fortunate. We moved into a area called Highlands North, which was similar to South Africa, Highlands North, Johannesburg, excepting for everybody came from somewhere else in the States. Everybody, they were all executives from J.C. Penney, from Ford, from all the big companies, from Texas Instruments. They came from everywhere. Each one had the same comment. They'd been traveling all over the States for their companies, and each and every one of them said, we're not moving again. And I integrated with these people, and we formed a bond, and we were very fortunate also. We got involved with a Colombian club, which was a Jewish club,
right.
and that became actually our whole social life. And we decided we wanted to integrate with an American society so we could feel that way. And so it's no aspersion on Jewish community or anything. We did join the JCC, of course, like everybody else. And we joined synagogues here, but we chose that ourselves to not be in the same society that we'd left.
So, talk about any challenges that you and your family faced adjusting to life in South Africa.
In South Africa?
I mean, sorry, in Dallas. Any specific things that were very different from what your life was like in South Africa?
Well, for the children's point of view, it was school. It was a very, very traumatic change. Very traumatic.
How old were your
change.
children at the time?
My baby was 7, my eldest was 16, and my two others were 13 and 14. My baby decided straight away that she was going to become American. My others didn't. But they found it a very strange society. They had the tougher time. From Arlene's and my perspective, the only tough time we had was in business, where I was cheated like I'd never been cheated before. I found that the society in Texas was the least honorable business society that I had ever met. I also found lacking the legal knowledge that I had in South Africa, proved to be a terrible detriment to my success here. And even when I became successful, I found that there was no loyalty amongst customers. You must understand, when I built my business in South Africa, the big business, I had helped little, small Greek and Italian businesses grow. I'd given them credit, I'd done different things, and you couldn't lose my business unless I tried to cheat them. I was Mr. Louis to them. I was their savior. I helped them grow their businesses. When I came to the States, first of all, I was cheated by business partners, then I was cheated by management, I was cheated by employees, everybody I tried to give things to. But my worst episode was when I saved customers of mine millions of dollars, and then when product became free and easy, they sold me out for a quarter penny. And that's when I decided I didn't want to actually be in business in this environment anymore. Also, Dallas and Texas is strange. When you become part and parcel of the society, yes, I did find very, very loyal customers, but you have to be a Texan, otherwise it doesn't work. And then there was another very big problem in Texas. To make a deal in New York, you can pull your teeth out. But once you made a deal and shake hands, it's a deal. In Texas, everybody will shake your hand and say it's a deal and means nothing. So that was a very big disappointment to me. And when Craig took over our business, my son, he'd learned from me, and he was ruthless. And I couldn't be that. I couldn't change my nature the way I had grown up doing business in South Africa, where people appreciated when you did something for them.
Right. Okay, interesting. So you talked about you got involved, you joined the JCC, you joined synagogues. Did you get involved in the Jewish community at all?
Not really, the Jewish community. Yes, I did. I supported everything. I got involved in APAC in a big way, and I supported all the societies, and I supported the synagogue, and I worked for them. I'm more of a loner type of person. I'm not a person who's a committee person. I'm a little forceful. I speak my mind, good, bad, or indifferent, and I tell it as it is. And as such, I'm not a very good committee person. I'm a very good chairman, so long as I've got good people under me. But otherwise, I'm a very, very, I don't work that well with people, quite frankly.
Now, I don't think there were really Jewish schools for your kids when you came. Your kids were a little older.
No, there were not Jewish schools, and quite frankly, I couldn't have afforded it when we came here. When our kids came here, they had Hobson's choice. They could go to one college, and that was UT Austin. And they were given a fixed amount, and they had to work, and they had to pull their own weight. And that was it. I mean, my son would have loved to have gone to an Ivy League school or another school, and my daughters didn't mind because they played well and they had a great time. But no, there was no such thing as me being able to afford. When I came here, I was supporting my mother. I brought her over here.
Oh, you did.
I was supporting Oren's uncle and wife. I helped bring them here. I was helping support them. I was helping support my in-laws in South Africa, and I was taken for a ride by business partners here through legalities. So right through the early 80s, and then management gave me a rough time. I had a very, very rough learning experience. So even if there had been a Jewish school, I couldn't have afforded a private school.
So I guess your kids went through public schools.
They went to public schools.
You mentioned you had a home in Israel. Did you ever consider making Aliyah and living in Israel?
I did, but Arlene wouldn't hear of it. I didn't have a home. I just had this piece of property there. We never built. We had the plans to build, but we never. I actually wanted to make Aliyah to Israel. My brother was there, my big brother, and I'd been a supporter all my life. I mean, so, but we had to consider. I had to consider my children as well, and. This was a wonderful choice. I mean, our children bless us every day for bringing them here.
So,
they really do.
All right. Tell us about your children, where they are, where they live.
My eldest daughter is now in La Jolla. She has a home there. She went to school at, as I said, at J.J. Pierce, and she made her own way there. She became the MP there, and she was in the acting group there, and then she went to Austin and did marketing, and she played better than anybody you can ever imagine. But she's a smart kid, so she got through in her 4 years. Came back, worked on her own, made a success working in the advertising industry. Got married to an idiot who came to work for me, and I supported them for many, many years, and afterwards my poor son had the obligation to support them. And as soon as all of this took place, and as soon as his children were grown a little bit, he decided to divorce my daughter and move on my money, because I paid him out a hell of a lot of money. But she has gone forward. It's been tough for her, and now she's living in La Jolla. She's got a beautiful home there, and she's got a man friend, how good or bad or indifferent it is, that's her business. She's a grown lady.
And her children are where?
Her son's in Boulder. He's a geophysicist, looking for a decent job. All he can get today is as a navvy, and I mean it as a navvy, doing field work and getting paid less than a labourer. And her second son is in Austin. He's got 2 more years to go in school. He is a 4-year recovering drug addict. He unfortunately, and we must be honest, he got himself involved in making a lot of money and dealing in drugs in Boulder, and went to a rehab, and the young man has become the most beautiful of beautiful people. Went through 2 years of school, college, just community college in Austin, and now he's at just finishing a degree, so he'll have a degree. But I mean, the guy is smart as a tack, and he's going to make it well. My third grandson is not from that family, of course. He's from my
So let's talk about your second. You talk about your oldest child.
That's my oldest.
Right, your daughter, right?
Children. Then my son also went to UT, but he didn't play like his sisters. He played tennis in his off time, and when he was in school, I said to him, "Craig, how do you do what you do?" He said, "Dad, I'll sit in the front row." There were 800 kids in the class. He graduated cum laude. There were 10 kids on the stage in engineering out of 1,000 kids. 9 Asians, and my son. Before he came into my business, he had to prove himself, for his sake, I said, and for mine. And he did. He went to work for a company here to get your engineering degree. You have to practice as an engineer, and he did that. He worked for Electrospace. He went to Washington. He set up communication systems in the Pentagon and in the Vice President's house. And then I gave him an ultimatum. I'm either going to sell the business, because I'd had it with managers and everything, or he comes in and joins me. And he elected to come in and join me, gave up the opportunity to join some young men who made a business that he was supposed to be involved in worth hundreds of millions. And he joined me at a time when my management was pulling out of the business, trying to sell it, and I was in South Africa and I was actually Bohula. But we built together, and that's the difference. When you've got family, you can build together. So he helped me build, and afterwards he really took it to a much higher level. It's due to him that afterwards the business took off on a more sophisticated manner. And subsequently he decided to retire at the age of 49 or 50 to Aspen, which he's done.
And so that's where he lives today?
He lives in Aspen.
Okay.
His eldest daughter, at 14, decided that Aspen was too small for her. This is a very interesting story. She then researched, and she found an all-girls school in Connecticut. Thank goodness he could afford it. Much more expensive than any Ivy League school. 200 kids there. And she decided to take herself off to boarding school. And she's been there for 4 years, and she's going to graduate in May the 25th. And every college she's applied to, of course, has accepted her. I have a little printer over here, and this is 2 years ago. She's sitting down over there, and I said to her, she wanted to print something from the other computer, and I said it doesn't work. She said, why? I said, I had an expert here for 4 hours. She said, nonsense, yeah. In 2 minutes she had it working. At her second year there, she took graduate level 5 computer skills. Just that kind of kid, you know. She's going to do civil engineering as well.
Interesting.
SMU has accepted her with a what's her name?
Scholarship.
Scholarship that the amount of money is, to me, it's inconceivable how much. It virtually gives her more than half a schooling for nothing for 4 years. That's the amount of money. But his son is a Julik, he loves to ski, and that's it. But they enjoy life.
Okay, so that's your second. So
My
it's daughter, son, and then?
And then I have a daughter who's crazy.
Yeah.
My third child also played like anything through college, did a marketing, highly successful, worked for a company in Fort Worth, went to China or somewhere for them and did all kinds of things, came back and met a young man. They were the first J date at the JCC.
Interesting, yeah.
And got married. After they had 2 children, she decided she wants to become a teacher. So now she became a maths teacher. And then that wasn't enough, so she took a master's in maths teaching. And then she took this and that and that and that. And anyway, she was at Akiba and really she established the maths department over there. And now, last year she decided to retire, and what does she do? She does pro bono maths in South Dallas, where you wouldn't go.
Yeah.
In her spare time she makes sandwiches and hands them out to all the homeless people.
Wonderful.
That's
Yeah.
my daughter.
Lovely.
Ask her whatever you want. And oh, and by the way, otherwise she's doing everything for Booker T, where her children went, and her eldest son, her eldest son finished there 2 years ago. Her younger son is graduating in June
Right.
the 5th. Her eldest son went with NYU to Paris for his first year, because that was a condition. He hated languages. He was the only kid at a kibbutz who didn't have to take Hebrew.
Wow.
He just refused. He hates languages. But so NYU made him go to Paris. And of course, he's a very dedicated student, so he learned French. He only read French newspapers, and studied, and only listened to French TV. That's the kind of kid he is. I mean, he wants to be a political journalist, I think is his latest. At any rate, he's in New York now, studying at NYU. What he's studying, I don't know. But he's a barista in his spare time, because he's a coffee maven, and he just loves the coffee scene. So the younger son is a semi-genius. The father she married a very, very, very smart man from a very smart family. His father is an actuary by profession, but he's so smart he lives on an off-roof in India. The father left his actuarial thing, divorced his mother many, many years ago, like 36 or 37 years ago. But they are smart can be, I mean, you know. And the younger guy is just a lazy guy, doesn't want school, but he's as smart as a whip. What he's going to do, I don't know. He says he wants to manage sports players, which is not a bad idea. Very, very, very exciting thing. So that's my third child, my daughter. My youngest, Sharon, is in San Antonio, and I think she's the smartest of all my children. Didn't finish school. She had problems as a kid. As I said, the move was very difficult for her. She had anorexia as a young woman, and she's overcome it, and she's a star. I must tell you, she's a star. No education. She took over in our business the collections, handled all the accounts receivable, did a fantastic job, and she is as perceptive as anybody can imagine. She's got 2 children. She's not married to a Jewish boy, she's married to a Catholic boy, comes from a wonderful family, and also a very bright guy. Unfortunately, hasn't really reached his potential, the father, but very smart. So between the 2 of them, they have 2 children who are still babies. The one is 13 and the other one is 11, but the 13-year-old wins he's an Episcopalian school, which is not an easy school, but he wins every thing that's going. Any class, he's not just on top, he's on top of the top. I mean, so he's just a genius kid. And the little girl of 11 is not 11 in my opinion, she's 31. She is so smart. And so, let me give you for instance with her. She goes to an Episcopalian school, and she tells Arlene and I, she and her brother, the only two Jews at the school. 2 years ago, when she's only 9 years old, she starts telling me about Yoska Pandra, right? So I took her outside on the patio and I taught her about Hashem. And she listens now. This is 9 years old. The next thing I hear, she's at school, 9 years old, at Episcopalian school, and the teacher's telling them things and she says, not so. The teacher, though, had character, and she got her up, and this little kid went to the top of the class there and started teaching the class about Hashem. So, I'm very, very fortunate, and Arlene and I are very fortunate. We've got 4 very bright children. We have 8 very, very bright grandchildren. As I said, the one is Craig's son he doesn't care. He figures out his father will support him, and it doesn't matter. But all of them are very bright, and we have a wonderful, wonderful relationship. It's just a shame that everybody's moved away from Dallas, but that's how it is. And that's why we are going to leave Dallas. We've got no family left.
Yeah.
My niece and nephew are the last of the Mohicans here. It's Cynthia and Seymour. I brought them out over here. I think it's now 31 years ago. And but they'll follow us in time to La Jolla.
Okay. Lou, you've talked about your business, but you haven't told us what kind of business it was. What is it that you did?
Well, I started off here selling product that I used to manufacture in South Africa. And then through force of circumstances, again, got involved with my so-called partner in Houston, who was a managing partner, even though I put in all the money and the brains and all the contacts. But he ruled it, and he got me involved as a young immigrant and a young man in debt, running to, at that stage was about $500,000. And I didn't have $500,000. So I was forced into the distribution business, which I hated. And so I did that for many years until I bought a very small, a few years later, very small fabricating business. Very, very, very small. So you can understand, we used to use at that stage, because you can't work on the concept of numbers of parts we made. We used to make 50 to 100,000 of those little parts. Afterwards we were making 20 million of those parts when we developed it, but that was a very small part of our business. To understand, we used to use 5,000 to 10,000 pounds of raw materials a month, and afterwards we used to use 40,000 pounds to 80,000 pounds a day.
Wow.
We had a very, very large business over there. We developed it. We built this small fabricating. We sold our distribution business. I had a company in Houston. I had a distribution place in San Antonio and in Dallas. We used to not just sell materials, but we had plate saws, different kinds of saws, and there were water jets, and then we had stripping machines. We had everybody thinks that metal distribution is just selling like raw things, but it's not like that. In order to be competitive, you've got to add value. And so we had a plate saw, for instance, that cost $500,000 within it, and we had a stripping machine, slitting machines, and that's what you had to do. You had to put value onto metal. So we had these places, and I hated it because I hated the distribution business, as I explained to you, because people would sell you out for quarter of pennies. In 1989, I literally made customers rich because I had product. I was importing from all over. I understood the business, you know. I'd grown up in it in South Africa and brought all my knowledge here. And I made my customers wealthy people, because instead of charging inflated prices like all my competitors, I didn't understand that way to do it. I was making a good living, and I let them make a living. And as I said afterwards, they sold me out for quarter pennies, and I hated it. And so in 1998, I sold our distribution business to Reliance Steel. We sold them all the facilities. I owned a facility in Houston. I had the facility in Dallas, the warehouse I owned and paid for, and we had a facility in San Antonio, which we just leased property there, but I sold them all the equipment and all the inventory and everything. And 1998 we started to concentrate on just the fabrication, and that was the side of the business Craig was running.
Right.
Before that we divorced it, so because we're both hard heads. He looked after the warehouse and the and all the fabricating side, and I looked after the buying and after the finances of the business, and I looked after the marketing of the bulk products. He looked after the marketing of the finished goods.
Okay.
And so in 1998 we started concentrating on that, and Craig became very well known because he would go into a place and see a product, and the product they would be spending 75 or 80 cents to make it, and he'd figure out a way to make it for 50 cents that would cost us 10 cents, because we built our own machinery and equipment. I never hired college graduates. Texans are the most remarkable, innovative people. They have grown up being forced to be so. They grow up on farms or in their homes, and there's nobody to help them. They've got to fix their own automobiles. They've got to do all kinds of things themselves. And so all our employees, what we did do, we sent them for further schooling in order to be able to utilize the more exotic equipment, because everything is CAD now. There's no such thing. You can't operate a business such as ours and be competitive with China unless you build your own equipment and you have everything automated.
Right.
Because their labor costs are so cheap. I've been to China. I've seen their factories. They use American-made equipment, and then they export it here for half the price. Even their raw materials come from American fabricated plants. I've been there.
Yeah.
So what we had to do was to build all our own and to design all our own, and we did. We employed people, we sent them to school. Even my accounting guy, I took him out of school. I couldn't stand it. Everybody came to me, they told me what geniuses they were. In the end, I hired a young man out of school, and he used to hit, he's 6'5", I'm all 5'5", and he'd stick his head around the corner and say, "What do I do next?" And I said, "You'll see." And we sent him to school to get an MBA, and he took over the company. And the same with the engineering. We hired a young man and sent him to school to learn how to design and use the equipment to design CADs, and that's what we did. So in the end of the story, we became a fabricating plant, and all the major manufacturers of air conditioning were our customers. Carrier, Rheem, Lennox, know, it's like Whirlpool type of thing. Whirlpool makes washing machines for 20 different people, you know. And so Goodman down in Houston makes air conditioning for everybody over there. So, and that's what we do. We sold the facility. Well, Craig gave it away, in my opinion, to his employees. They paid us out of what's it, about 4 years ago. He decided he wanted to spend time skiing. It was more important. Good luck to him. I did the same thing at his age, so why shouldn't he?
Right. Lou, so since you came to Dallas, have any other family members come out? You talked about a nephew.
Well, first we brought out, we went to Canada, or we went to Israel first, and Arlene's uncle was very, very unhappy. So we brought him out here to Dallas, he and his wife, and their children were in Canada, and they stayed here, and until he passed on. I think it was 2002 or something, but in the beginning we brought him out, and then we brought out my niece and nephew when they had just one little baby. Arlene's uncle, of course, was much older, and he passed on. His wife is living now in Boca Raton. Their children bought her an apartment there. Very smart family, very insular family, but very smart. And but my niece and nephew are still in Dallas. She works at the J. She does one hell of a good job, and he works in selling furniture for Michael. What's her name? What's that fancy?
Michael Wolkoff.
Yeah, Michael.
Okay.
He's a very, very nice and smart young man.
And do you still have family in South Africa? Anybody left there?
Yeah, I don't have that much there. Arlene does. Arlene's got her sister and brother-in-law and their family. All their kids are there. Their 3 kids and all. Well, 2 kids. One, the son is in England, and she has her late brother's family are still there, and their 4 children are there. There are not too many grandchildren there. There are 4 children. Only 2 of them had children. And to me, I've got a nephew there. That's all I've really got left in South Africa. He's in East London, and his family is everywhere. It's in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, and one son is there, but very little possibility of them to meet Jewish people down in East London. So the one son who's an Adonis, I mean, he's an Adonis. You can't even begin to believe how beautiful. Marries a girl from Mexico. He had the opportunity. The wealthiest Jewish families in New York were looking for him because he was an au pair over there for a while with one of these fancy families who we met on the ski slopes at Aspen. And the other guy is a very smart young man, got a nice Chattis girlfriend who is now marrying. He's been living with her for 10 years, and they're getting married in Mauritius next month. And his daughter, believe it or not, is in banking and works at Standard Bank in Johannesburg, in the middle of town. And she's, of course, only got non-Jewish boyfriends there. But you must understand it's a different world, and that's all I have there. So, and I have absolutely this much interest in going anywhere near South Africa.
Well, that was going to be my next question. What do you miss about life in South Africa?
Nothing.
Nothing at all.
Absolutely nothing.
Have you been to visit recently?
We took our whole family for our 50th anniversary 7 years ago, we took them
Right.
all over, to such an extent that each place we visited, they said, why are we leaving?
Yeah.
And when we got to the next place, they said, wow, because we went to only the best game parks, and then we went to the Cape, to the what's her name, and we went to Victoria Falls. So we spent a couple of weeks over there. We had a party of 22, Marlene and I took, and we had what they call a geschwollene talk. It was a wonderful, wonderful visit, but that to me was all it was,
Right.
was a visit. I never found my lifestyle there to be a satisfactory one. I have never ever tried to utilize anybody of a lesser station than I am. In other words, if you were to tell me to sell this to somebody for $5 and I figured it was only worth $3, I couldn't do it. And so, employing black people there as I was forced to, and employ them, some of them who were much smarter than the white people that I was employing, and having to put them in a much more basic position went completely against my grain. And I felt also as a Jew that it was completely against my upbringing and religion and my heritage that I should do such a thing. So no, I never felt good about it. I had a life there, you must understand, before we left, when I went into business on my own, I used to work maybe 2 days a week, and I used to work maybe 6 to 8 months or 9 months. No, I'd work about 9 months of the year. But when I was working 2 days a week, and I made more money than I could ever count.
Yeah.
So, you know,
It was good to you, did it?
money was never my objective. Money has always been a tool to enjoy life. Even today, I feel the same way. And that's what I try to teach my children and my grandchildren. The value of work, because one must work, but one must do what one enjoys and to achieve. And creating beauty has always been what I prefer to see. So you asked me if I've been involved in the Jewish society. Now I've been more so involved in the non-Jewish, not non-Jewish, but rather in the general thing, whether it's United Way, or whether it's the Symphony, or whether it's Theatre 3, or in the arts and the art museum, and these have been rather our focus, because the broader spectrum of life is what we've really focused on.
I presume you're a US citizen.
I have been at the first opportunity.
Alright.
I came here on an H1, and because that was the only way I could get here as fast as I wanted to. I employed a high-powered lawyer in Washington, very, very expensive and very, very smart guy, and within a year my H1 became a green card, and then I became a citizen here in 1984.
Right. So I presume you're glad you made the move, you're happy, or you have been happy in Dallas, and you're ready for the next stage of your life.
It is a very traumatic thing for us to leave Dallas. The shul is really part of our lives as well.
What shul?
We belong to Beth Torah. When I walk into Beth Torah, everybody knows me, I know everybody. And when I go to California, we also belong to shul there. Beth El, when I go there, I know nobody. It's very difficult. When I go to Symphony here, I see all the same faces. When I go to opera, everybody knows me. You know, wherever I am. But as I said, when I was at the Colombian Club, it was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful social place when I joined it in the 80s and the 90s, Jewish club, and it was wonderful. And so for Arlene and I to leave Dallas, we're not leaving Dallas easily. It's a very difficult and traumatic thing. And anybody, and I have a lot of, well, I have a cousin in La Jolla who runs down Dallas, and I get mad. I get really mad because he made his fortune here.
Right.
And now he's living a wonderful life in La Jolla, only because he was involved in the scheme in the Rowlett over there with the housing business. He was the engineer. He didn't do the crooked stuff,
Right.
but he made the money out of it, right?
Yeah.
And that started him. And how do you run down a place where you've made your money? And that's why our whole focus, Arlene and mine, has been on philanthropy, to give back to the community. And we do. We make sure. I know a lot of people just give, they say, if you don't give to the Jewish communities, who else will? But we give to everybody.
Well, they're part of the
make
community.
sure we
The
give to the
general Dallas
community.
community.
That's what I said. We're involved in the community, whether it's Buckner or the North Dallas Food Bank or whoever it is. We support them, and we support the arts, and we support everybody.
Nice.
It's a community thing as far as we're concerned. Sure, our main thing is on, focus was on Jewish, but and the shul, but not that I'm a very ardent shul goer, we're not.
Right.
But I believe in it, and we support it, and we do that because it's part of the community that we grew up in.
Is there anything that you have that is very sentimental value that you'd like to show us? Anything from South Africa, from Lithuania, special books, book collection?
Well,
Anything?
my main thing is, as I said, I've got, for instance, those books on the top there at the centre. There were books, and on the top over there are books that my late father accumulated from.
Should we try and focus on it?
Well, if on those right on top there.
The top